Name, Hanju. Lifespan, 11/65. Race, mortal. Cultivation, none. Technique, none. Magic, none. Mystical power, none. Equipment, none. Cultivation potential, extremely bad, click to roll the dice. Connate providence is as follows, click to roll the dice. Click here to start your thrilling life.
Looking at the attributes list in front of him, the 11-year-old Hanju almost lost all hope. Cultivation potential and connate providence could be randomly changed every day by rolling the dice. However, each could only be changed once, and they could be refreshed every day at 7 in the morning. Hanju had been refreshing since he was born. It had been 11 years, but he still hadn't managed to produce the best attributes and connate providence. Should I just start like this? A thought popped up in Hanju's mind. No. It wasn't easy for him to come to a world of immortals and ghosts. How could it allow mortals to cultivate? Hanju wanted to be the almighty protagonist. Roll the dice again. Hanju raised his hand and clicked at the attributes list in front of him. Cultivation potential changed.
Cultivation potential, none.
Hanju's young face instantly darkened. Again.
Destined lone star, brings bad luck to friends and family. Loneliness for life. Lifespan increased by 100 years.
Fuck. Even destined lone star had appeared. Who wants to be alone for life? Hanju was so angry that he lay down and rolled on the grass. For an entire 11 years, he was unable to produce any outstanding cultivation potential and connate providence. No. Continue rolling the dice. I don't believe it. Hanju trembled in anger. After half an hour, he finally got up. Hanju was a reborn person. In his previous life, he lived in the 21st century on Earth. At a young age, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He didn't want to undergo painful treatment and went home to wait for death. That night, to numb himself, he found an old-school cultivation game to play. He played all night and was very hyped up. He got sleepy at dawn and thus died. When he opened his eyes again, he was reincarnated into this ancient world. He was born into a cultivation sect. The Jade Pure sect was a righteous cultivation sect of the Great Yen dynasty. On the day that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, Hanju was terrified. This was the first time he knew that life was so important. But now in his new life, he could actually cultivate. He was pleasantly surprised. He had to cultivate. He wanted to live longer than anyone else. However, he couldn't cultivate as a mortal. Ever since he was born, Hanju had been living without any pressure. His parents were the servants of Elder Iron, an alchemy master of the Jade Pure sect's outer section. They usually planted medicinal herbs for Elder Iron. An alchemist's status was special. In the outer sect, no one dared to offend Elder Iron. He had dozens of servants under him, all of whom were mortals. Even if they had cultivation potential, Elder Iron wouldn't allow his servants to cultivate. He was probably afraid they would steal his herbs. His herbs were beneficial to cultivators, but to mortals, they were poison. However, when he was 6 years old, his parents fled, leaving the young Hanju in Elder Iron's herb garden. Hanju could understand. It would definitely be inconvenient to escape with a child. Elder Iron didn't mind. Instead, he asked someone to guide Hanju in helping him grow the herbs. As time passed, Hanju became familiar with all the plants in the herb garden. Elder Iron didn't make things difficult for Hanju, and Hanju continued to roll his dice. Since he was immortal now, he might as well wait. Sigh, I will just keep rolling. If I can't produce a heaven-defying providence before the age of 30, then forget it. Even if I'm gonna cultivate as a mortal, so be it. Hanju thought silently. The oldest servant in the herbal garden was in his 70s. He was called Old Man Wang. He had been chosen by Elder Iron when he was in his teens. Now, he was the leader of the servants. All the servants followed his lead. Hanju stood up and returned to the herb garden. He began to sprinkle water and clean up the dead leaves. The herb garden was huge, as big as a football field. Every servant was very careful when they worked. If they accidentally damaged the plants, Elder Iron would be furious. Some of the herbs were even poisonous. Elder Iron had only gone out last month and would probably take 2 to 3 years to return. To cultivators, 2 or 3 years were nothing at all. In the herb garden, Hanju was a man of few words. He didn't have many friends and only interacted with Old Man Wang. After he was done, he returned to his room and started doing push-ups to train his body. The next morning, Hanju washed up. Then, he sat on the wooden bed and waited. Hanju waited until the time when the attributes list was refreshed before he perked up. It felt like a lottery draw. This was what he looked forward to the most every day. He rubbed his hands together. First, he was going to roll the dice for cultivation potential.
Cultivation potential, none.
Fuck. This is too despicable. Hanju almost died of anger. His hands began to tremble as he continued to draw out the Khanate Providence. The die rolled.
Khanate Providence is as follows. Unparalleled, immortal beauty, top-notch charm. Destined sword fanatic, top-notch sword Dao aptitude, top-notch sword Dao learning ability. Unparalleled movement technique, top-notch movement technique aptitude. Descendant of the Immortal Emperor, after the game begins, you will receive an unparalleled cultivation technique and 1,000 superior grade spirit stones.
Hanju was stunned. His eyes widened in surprise. 4 Khanate Providences. This was the first time 4 Khanate Providences had been produced, and they all looked very impressive. Hanju became more and more excited. This is it. No. They are it. For top-notch, 1 unparalleled. One look and one could tell that it was extraordinary. After rolling the dice for 11 years, day after day, the goddess of fortune was finally blessing him. Hanju tried hard to calm down. Without a cultivation potential, he couldn't start his game life yet. He still had to roll the dice for the cultivation potential. Finally, I'm seeing a silver lining. With these 4 supreme-grade Khanate Providences, even if I start cultivating at the age of 40, I can still make it in time. I can rest assured and continue rolling the dice for cultivation potential. Hanju was in a good mood when he thought of this. He had been rolling for 11 years, so what if it would take another 11 years? Hanju let out a long sigh, then got up and left the room to begin his day's work. 6 people were living in the house with him, and each of them had a bed. The others had woken up early in the morning. Everyone had a region they were responsible for, so they didn't dare to make any mistakes. Hanju was still young and only needed to do some simple work. Elder Iron didn't dare to let him be in charge of an area. The sun was exceptionally bright today. Perhaps it had something to do with his mood. The other servants didn't feel Hanju's change. He hadn't started his thrilling life yet, so the enhancements due to the Khanate Providence hadn't appeared yet. Noon. 2 cultivators arrived. The Jade Pure sect was very big. The herb garden was surrounded by mountains. Cultivators weren't allowed to come here. Most of the time, the outer sect deacons would be the ones who came to ask for pills. These 2 cultivators had excellent temperaments. One was a man and the other was a woman. They looked like an immortal couple, attracting the attention of all the servants. Hanju also turned to look at the entrance of the herb garden. How glamorous. Hanju sighed. The clothes of the servants were tattered, and the clothes of the 2 cultivators were clean and gorgeous. They looked like NPCs from an online cultivation game. It was just a random exclamation. He didn't feel envious at all. He had already obtained 4 Khanate Providences, and his future achievements were not something that the outer sect, disciples of the Jade Pure sect, could compare to. The male cultivator expressionlessly said to Old Man Wang, "From today onwards, the two of us will be responsible for protecting Elder Iron's medicinal herb garden. You don't need to be bothered by us. Also, don't disturb our cultivation." "Did something happen to Elder Iron?" Old Man Wang asked cautiously. Although Elder Iron was temperamental, Old Man Wang had accompanied him for decades and naturally did not wish for anything to happen to him. The female cultivator shook her head and said, "The Jade Pure sect has recently been infiltrated by a fiendish cultivator. The outer sect has specially sent the two of us to protect you. You don't have to worry." Old Man Wang heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing that. He cupped his hands and bowed, then turned and left. The two cultivators walked away and meditated under the trees on both sides of the entrance into the herb garden. As they began their breathing exercises, visible whirlwinds appeared around them. That must be spirit chi. Hanju thought silently and continued sprinkling water. The next day, Hanju continued rolling the dice.
Cultivation potential, none.
Hanju rolled his eyes. He didn't find it strange. He did not panic. In any case, he had obtained 4 top-notch Khanate providences. He could take his time in getting the best cultivation potential. The presence of the two cultivators did not change the lives of the herb garden servants. The dull life continued. Apart from his work, Hanju trained his body and rolled the dice every day. On the 3rd day, he rolled the dice.
Cultivation potential, none.
"Fine. I know you're messing with me." Hanju cursed in his head. On the 4th day,
Cultivation potential, 5 elements mixed potential. Cultivation cannot exceed foundational establishment.
yes, the standard for moral cultivation. Hanju shook his head. He still had to continue rolling the dice. He would never allow himself to cultivate as a mortal. Just like that, Hanju exercised every day and rolled the dice every day. Most of the time, he would obtain mixed potential. He wasn't discouraged. He believed that he would be able to obtain a godlike cultivation potential. It was fine to cultivate later. Anyway, he wasn't seeking revenge. 2 years later, Elder Iron returned and the two cultivators bowed and bid farewell. All the servants gathered and knelt down before Elder Iron. Elder Iron wore a black robe, and 2 gourds were hanging from his waist. His hair was black and white, and his expression was gloomy and fierce. He looked very bad-tempered indeed. Not bad, no mistakes. Elder Iron looked around and smiled in satisfaction. The servants heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. Elder Iron looked at Hanju and the other youngsters beside him. "The 4 of you, follow me." Elder Iron pointed and walked towards his pavilion. Hanju was one of the 4. They immediately followed. "He wants to arrange for us to be in charge of a portion of the garden?" Hanju thought silently. He suddenly noticed that blood was dripping from Elder Iron's right hand. Hanju was shocked. Could it be that Elder Iron was injured and wanted to make them into puppets or use them as ingredients for pills? Hanju had read many cultivation novels in his previous life. The one thing that left the deepest impression on him was that cultivators would rather kill their friends than die themselves. To cultivators, nothing was more important than their own lives. The more Hanju thought about it, the more panicked he became. He didn't dare to escape and could only try his best to calm himself down. After entering the house, a youngster closed the door. Elder Iron sat at the end of the table and scrutinized Hanju and the others. "All of you, stretch out your hands," Elder Iron instructed. Hanju and the others raised their right hands. Elder Iron touched them one by one. Hanju could feel the goosebumps on his arm. "Only you have a cultivation potential. The rest can go back," Elder Iron said to a tall and strong youth. Hanju heaved a sigh of relief. This morning, he rolled the dice for the cultivation potential again. Yesterday, he still had a quadruple cultivation potential. But today, it was gone. Unexpectedly, it was a blessing in disguise. Hanju looked at the youngster sympathetically. Xianggu, a passionate and popular teenager who liked pigeons. The other two youngsters looked at Xianggu with envy. Xianggu was both excited and nervous. Elder Iron didn't allow servants to cultivate, but this was also the first time he checked the servants' cultivation potential. After leaving the pavilion, Hanju ignored the discussion of the other two youngsters and returned to work. From then on, Xianggu no longer participated in the labor. It turned out that Elder Iron had taken him in as a disciple. This made the other servants even more envious and jealous. Hanju wasn't envious at all. It must be a trap. He would first nurture him before killing him. Hanju was glad that he wasn't chosen. He had the system, so he didn't need a master. In the blink of an eye, another 2 years had passed. Elder Iron left the herb garden again half a year ago. After he had left, the two cultivators from before came to protect the herb garden again. Xianggu was already a cultivator. So, he even went forth to talk with the two cultivators. All the slaves had to obey him now. Fortunately, Xianggu was busy cultivating and did not bully other servants. They were slaves for the rest of their lives. Elder Iron often went out, and they weren't allowed to leave the herb garden. There were no conflicts of interest, so there were very few quarrels. Hanju was already 15 years old and still kept a low profile. In the past 4 years, the best cultivation potential he rolled was a triple cultivation potential. He could reach the golden core realm with it. The golden core realm was nothing. Hanju's goal was to live forever and become immortal. That morning, Hanju rolled the dice casually. He didn't have any expectations. It was like getting up every day to rinse his mouth.
Cultivation potential, water and wood double cultivation potential. Extraordinary aptitude. There's hope to cultivate to the nascent soul realm.
Double cultivation potential? Nascent soul realm? Hope? Hanju clicked his tongue, completely unmoved. He was only 15. He could roll the dice for another 15 years. Continue rolling the dice. Spring passed and autumn came. Another year passed. Hanju rolled the dice every morning as usual.
Cultivation potential, spiritual physique of the 6 paths. It contains top-notch wind, fire, water, earth, wood, and thunder. Cultivation potentials. Increases providence to a certain extent.
Just this? Hanju scoffed subconsciously. Wait. It's this. Hanju's eyes widened and his breathing quickened. It's here. It's been 16 years. Finally, a protagonist's cultivation potential. Hanju rubbed his eyes and confirmed carefully. Top-grade cultivation potential. And it was a top-grade cultivation potential with 6 attributes. Humph. Hanju tried hard to calm down. Finally. This is it. This was the spirit root aptitude that he should have. Hanju didn't immediately click to start the life of games. He was afraid that the commotion would be too big. After all, 2 cultivators were guarding the door. Here comes the question. How long do I have to wait? Hanju was in a dilemma. A line of words suddenly appeared in front of him.
You can choose a small place. The system will help you create a barrier. The cultivators outside the barrier will not be able to sense the changes within the barrier.
Hanju was pleasantly surprised. He immediately walked to the door. After confirming that all the servants had gone to the herb garden, he closed the door. He stood in the middle of the room and pulled up the stats list. His fingers trembled as he clicked on the bottom line.
Click here to start the life of games.
Successful. The attributes list changed. Lines of words appeared in front of Hanju.
Beginning life of games. Recount of your life. Hanju, you were born in a cultivation sect in the mortal world. From a young age, you were exceptionally beautiful and loved by everyone. Your parents abandoned you when you were young. It was as if you had a destiny for something. You have a talent that surpasses the rest of the world in the art of the sword. You can often feel that the world contains 6 mysterious powers that you cannot grasp or see. Until today, you accidentally awakened the immortal emperor's inheritance and obtained the unparalleled 6 paths of reincarnation technique. Because of this, you embarked on the path of cultivation. Please choose your main cultivation route. Swordsman, Thunder Cultivator, Earth Cultivator, Fire Cultivator, Water Cultivator, Wood Cultivator, Wind Cultivator.
Thanks for watching. Kindly subscribe for second part.